So, today we're talking about feeling like an outsider in your own family.
Outsider own family. What do you mean? I don't know anything about
Sometimes I
that.
want to be the outsider in my family sometimes. Like I said, this is for the days that you want to build real connection. Some days you don't.
Yeah, yeah. Like this problem, like ever walking into a room, like you don't belong. I mean, I felt that way a couple of times. We were talking about this kind of stuff a little bit earlier today.
We were.
Guy is trying to keep me at arm's length because I'm quote unquote forcing her out of the house.
According to her perspective,
Hmm.
and sometimes according to my mother bear perspective also, right?
Hmm.
Like, you know.
You know,
So, yeah, it definitely feels like that sometimes. I think in the beginning of the relationship, it felt different when we were first blending the family together. The feeling of feeling like an outsider is different than it does now, right? At that time, it was definitely, for me, recognizable, right? So you're there, you are starting to do the blended family thing. You're making dinner, because one of the ways that I like to show people that I care about them is cooking, right?
hmm. Oh
And
yeah,
so
I
I
love
love
that.
to cook, right? I love to cook. And so a big deal for me is making a family meal or, cooking for our family. And,
Right.
I don't expect all of my self worth to come from making the dinner, only half. No, I'm just kidding. But I do like to be appreciated for the efforts that I put in. But I remember at the beginning just trying to uh, create some sort of semblance of us. I'd come down to your house and Zach and Winnie would be there and I would make dinner and you were working at the time and then you'd get off and I'd be there right after the kids got there and I'd kind of get dinner ready and stuff like that. Um, and yeah, there was definitely times where I was like, okay, this is just weird. This is just weird. Like I'm in this other person's house where his ex-wife and these kids' mom used to live, and I'm, taking over the kitchen and making the meal and cleaning up the kitchen and all this stuff. I mean, whether that's here nor there, or whether, I mean, we could go on a whole nother tangent about whether or not that's something that women do because of society or not. But that, I mean, that could be a long rabbit trail. But yeah, I remember the feeling of being like, uh, I just don't really belong here, and the feeling that I kind of wanted it to be like, well, me and you, I have this relationship with Travis and we have this relationship on the side. And then I have my relationship with my kids and he has his relationship with his kids. And can't we just keep it that way? Right.
Right.
And
And
we kind of tried to do that for a while, I think.
well, if we're dating, then yeah, we can kind of do that. But once we get married, that doesn't work too well.
No, although we even had a thought about trying to do that. Like we were like, I remember, I at least remember thinking, okay, well, why even have one house? We'll just keep two houses. I'll have my family over there, and you'll
Yep.
have your family over there. Because we had
Yep.
two full working households.
Yep.
And I'll come to your house and visit sometimes, and you come to my house and visit sometimes. And then when the kids are at their alternative parents' house, then we'll, do our thing. And it was like, yeah, wouldn't that be just great if that was just feasible? But life gets in the way. I mean, wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yeah, that'd
So,
be that'd be great. So, but yeah, I understand where it comes from. I mean, there's been times where I felt like an outsider because I'm the one. I not putting anything on you or anything because was a mutual decision on things. But I sold my house and I moved into your house up here, and your whole family is like very close by. And then you've got your kids, and the kids' dad is close, and my family is scattered all over the country. So other than my kids, that's that's all I had here. So coming in and learning how you run your household, and I was like, okay, yep. So and honestly, it wasn't too bad because I grew up as blended family and everything like
hmm
that. So I had
hmm
that kind of going for me. I had kind of understood a little bit on what to expect, and then I had already experienced one blended family before with my kids. but I've
Right.
never been a stepdad myself. And that was a new experience.
I think, it's kind of like how you get into the relationship and you walk into the room and you're there and you're laughing, especially when Shayla was around,
Yeah.
so when Shayla was in the house and Shayla was there, being the adult child, right, still,
Yep.
back and forth at home, and then it would be you and Shayla, talking about, when Shayla and Jade were young. And
Right.
then on top of that, then now they're talking about, Shayla sharing with Winnie and Zachary about the time that Winnie and Zachary were young and Shayla was there. And I'm like, well, I'm like double removed from this whole situation, right? And and Shayla sharing about her mom, and and Winnie doesn't know her mom. It's just a freaking mess, really, if you think about it, right? Because you're walking into this situation and all these people around you that you're learning to care about or you want to be involved with already have these bonds with other people. They have a whole life that they lived before you, and you can show up there. Like, you can't show up in the past. It's not like you can rewind it and be like, oh yeah, let me insert myself there. So you're telling a story, da, 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 remember when we were in Virginia and blah 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 blah, and this, and we went and we walked to the 7-Eleven or the Circle K or whatever. And I'm like, no, don't recall that. Don't ever,
Right.
And Sheila's like, well, that's because you weren't there. Well, no kidding. Thanks. You know what I mean?
Right.
I forgot I wasn't there, but that's how, sometimes it feels being a step parent,
Yeah.
in your own house,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. And I got similar things. I mean, you and Caleb and Kyle were talking about things that happen here and there, and oh man, laughing here, and oh that was crazy, and you know, just different things like the baseball games, wrestling, exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, but beginning of any new relationship, a marriage, that it really is to be expected. It's a matter of, okay, now how do we integrate with each other?
Yeah, but I think what happens with blended families, like we've talked about already, is that are blended couples. Like, you're
Hmm.
coupling with somebody who has had a life before this life, right? And they didn't just have a life with their primary family, with their
Yep.
parents and their siblings and their aunts and uncles and grandparents. They have had children and extended family from previous partners. And so I think it's understandable when you're getting into an original family, you expect that you don't know things about this person and how they grew up, and that's part of the journey, is learning about their childhood and understanding where they came from. But when you're starting a relationship in a blended family, as a blended couple, you have that foundation, or that view is greatly expanded. Just because, I mean, you're not talking about, well, this is these two parents that I came from, and these were my three siblings, and da 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 da. Now you've got 100 people that have been in this person's life, in their immediate life, influencing them and still influencing them. And not only that, some of those people, like in an original family, the expectation doesn't always work, but an expectation is that you leave your parents behind and you start making your own decisions as a couple, right?
Yeah.
In a blended family, you have another adult who has decision making authority over your daily choices. So your kid's parent, that the other parent has direct influence and say over what happens in your day to day.
Yeah.
It's so much fun.
Oh yeah, that's a blast. And sometimes, well, most times on what we've experienced is that it turns into the financial side of things, how it affects us financially. And we're like, okay, so when is she going to pay this, or when is he going to pay that? And we would really like to have some help here. What's going on? We don't have any control over that, so we have to do what's best for the kids and dig in and shrug our shoulders and gnash our teeth and growl, and realize that it is not your fault and it's not my fault. It just happens to be a situation, and we're the ones that are being responsible and taking care of things for the kids. And later we can go after the ex, or the parent, and talk to them, or try talk to them, or whatever we need to do. But in the moment, if they're not participating, they're not participating, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Right. We still have to go on, right?
Right.
So I think, the part about this is that you get into the relationship, you're there, you're committed to the relationship, you show up, you're there, you try to love the kids, but then they're resistant at the beginning
Hmm.
to you being involved. And then later down the road, they're resistant, like you're bringing up here, in different ways, right? They're resistant in different ways. So at the beginning, like I said, at the beginning of this episode, we were talking about how you feel like you're at an arm's length and how it seems like at the beginning of the relationship, it's so much more direct. Like you can tell, okay, I'm not on the in group. I'm not on the inside. But later, it's you still have those dynamics going on. They're just a little bit different. So maybe let's talk about at the beginning, right? So for me, at the beginning, I remember thinking, okay, well, his kids have been through a lot. They don't really know me. I remember we went to the park. We took all the kids and we met up for had some fried chicken. It was like a picnic in the park. Remember that?
Yep.
First time I had met Shayla, and Zach and Winnie were there. And here we are. We're sitting down, and Shayla's like, hi. And I'm like, hey, so how are you? And it went as well as expected. And then we went for a walk. And every time, like, we're walking along, you're trying to hold my hand. And every single time you try to hold my hand, Winnie would come back around. And then Zach's kind of plugging along. Zach at that time it was what, 7 or so. And so he's
Hmm.
like, doing the 7-year-old thing, just kind of all over the place running around. But Winnie was definitely from the very beginning always very protective, right? I
Very
remember
protective.
being at your house, and I was just visiting one day, and it was probably maybe 2 months or 2 or 3 months into our relationship. I was just hanging out after school one day, and I got there, and she's there, and she's like, I don't like you.
She's always
Okay,
been
well,
pretty
she's
forthright.
very direct. She is a very direct person. And she's like, I don't like you. And I'm like, that's
So,
okay. You don't have to like me. We'll figure this out as we go, right? You can like me or don't like me. But the reality of that, even though at the time I had to choose to adult and be like, I'm going to say the right thing here. What I felt like saying was like, well, I'm like you little witch. Like, I don't
yeah,
even know you. How do you like? I want you here. You know what I mean? Like, hey, could you have like figured out how your dad could not have you so that we could have done this thing? I mean, so those are the things. Like, to be honest and raw, those are the things that go through your head. Of course, I didn't say those things to her, but those are the comments that you get, and then you have this struggle between feeling like you want to adult. You are obviously much older than these other human beings. You're there to provide mentoring to them, yet you're being purposely excluded for a variety of reasons, and they don't mean to be doing it, but they don't have any other way to express themselves, and honestly don't really have any reason to do anything else. You are a threat to their status quo.
just like Caleb was practicing his iron swing when I first came over.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So there's tons of moments where I wondered if we were ever really gonna feel like a unit, if we were ever gonna feel like a team. I had to go through a lot of emotional stuff. Like I said, I tend to react to things, and then I will listen to my internal voices. I may not express them. That's at least what I've learned. I'm not going to deny that I don't have those voices in there. But it's important to talk about this because this is something that's super common with blended families and step families. And you're definitely not alone in going through it. We have been there. We still continue to be there, even now that we've been blending for 4 years now,
4 years, yeah.
going on four
Yeah. So,
years, right? So there's a way through.
so now you and the kids, I feel, are pretty connected now. They're especially with Winnie. I mean, Winnie's
Hmm.
more so than Zach. So how did that happen? I mean, I am a lot more connected with Kaya too, and Caleb. Um, so you want to give your perspective on how that happened for you, or we don't?
Yeah, the thing is, you're right. Like I said, whether for better or for worse, I'm a very authentic person. So lying for me is terrible. I'm a terrible liar. If I want to show somebody that I don't feel something that I feel, it's not going to happen. Like, I'll be at work and we're in a meeting, and everybody in the room knows what I think about that exact thing, whether I want them to or not, because it just shows up on my face. So, um, I think that for me specifically, being a really dynamic and emotional person, caring, I care very much about my relationships, but I also care very much about being authentic and building authentic connection, right? So I'm not going to be like, oh, I just like you so much, and oh, isn't that so wonderful, and oh my god, right? Like, oh yeah, let's go paint our toes together, and I'm like, the last thing I freaking want to do is paint our toes together. Like, I don't even want to be around you. So, again, I'm not going to say that.
Well, actually, to be fair, a couple times you did say that, but Winnie was being very obstinate, and she would say things like, "Well, I don't even want you around," and you're like, "Well, I feel the same way sometimes."
That's true.
Being
That's
honest without
that's true.
being degrading.
Yeah. So I guess,
Uh,
what I'm trying to say is, I think part of building connection is recognizing that it's hard,
yes.
recognizing that it's not normal to immediately feel connected
No.
to these kids, or to your kids being with these kids, or to how the kids interact with each other, or how they're parented, or how they respond to things, or any of those things, because this is a completely different team, a different country, a different culture that you are engaging in, right? And the same for your partner. And if they have kids, their kids, right?
Yeah, part of my issue with Kaya was she was just starting to get into that young lady stage, trying
Mm-hmm.
figuring out where she was, and I had a little bit of experience with that with Shayla, but I never really had gone through the whole phase of it. So I'm kind of sitting back trying to see what's going on. And then I think with me, the best thing that happened was she was struggling in school with math. And I was like, I can help you with that. And we kind of sat down, and she was struggled with algebra, and me being patient. But that was one of the key things, was having the patience, which not everybody does, but you need to incorporate it. You need to build that patience. But I was able to sit down and be like, okay, A plus B equals C. That is algebra in its simplest form. Yeah, and just kind of broke it down, and she was able to actually understand it and start kind of doing well with it. I think that built trust with her, that I wasn't going to freak out on her because she wasn't getting it, because that was one of her paradigms.
Looking at that and saying, okay, so really, like you just said, it's looking for those opportunities where, backing way off of the I need to be your mom. I don't think most blended parents or most step parents go into the relationship being like, oh, I'm going to be your mom. Like, I've seen that before, unfortunately, but I don't think most go in thinking that they're there to take over and start parenting this child. But still, I think because you are in that role, you naturally you feel, or I did feel, the responsibility of providing the duties that go along with that role. And so I think one of the things that helped was, prioritizing the title. I remember having conversations with both Zach and Winnie, and also Shayla, in different ways, because there's such different age groups. And just explaining, hey, I'm not your mom. I'm never going to be your mom. I cannot be your mom. I can only be your stepmom. I can only be this person in your life. I can only be your dad's girlfriend. I can only be Dawn. And so, and through that, looking for ways to build a relationship, like you just explained, looking for ways that come up in the natural course of the day or the course of life where you can fill a need without tying a title to it. So you're like, hey, Kai is struggling with her homework, and I'm like, I'm terrible at it. Just give it to me, I'll do it. And you're like,
I
no,
got
no,
after
no.
you on that a couple of
She,
times.
yeah, you did. She needs to learn how to do it. I'm like, well, it's way easier if I just do it. But I mean, I wouldn't do that. But that's how I feel. But it's one of those things. It's just like finding small ways to be present without forcing things, without trying to be like, well, you need to eat your vegetables because I said so. It's more like, how can I create a role in this child's life, um, that is not a parent. I can be there, and I can be I can be a mentor and I can provide protection and I can do all the things that an adult in a community would do. And that connection can build over time as the kids come along. But you have to let it rest on the kids. The kids are the ones that have to set that pace.
Right. Now, I will say that, yes, the kids need to set the pace as far as the connection goes.
Right.
But there is a time where, as step parents, we do need to step into that authoritative role and be like, okay, enough is enough.
Yes.
You need to go do this, or you need to stop doing this. I'm not saying all of the time. There are times where, as a step parent, you need to reinforce the boundaries of the household that you, the spouses, have set, the husband and wife.
I think going back to where we were, right? I think there's this thought that I had to be their mom, and I still struggle with that sometimes, right? I still struggle with how a feeling like I have to fill this role, right? I mean, we just talked about that today. We just talked about it today where I was like, I'm sick and tired of making food that the kids don't like. Okay, well, that's a normal conversation in the course of a family. That's a non-blended family issue. It's a whole family issue. Like, kids don't like what I made. Okay. Kids don't
Right.
like dinner. Specifically, Winnie is the one that we have here full
Right.
time most of the time. Winnie doesn't want to make dinner. She'd rather eat junk food. So I just quit. I quit. I'm not cooking anymore.
Right. Well, so here's one thing that I notice is that, like you said, it's not just a step family thing. It's a family issue that kids don't like what the parents are fixing. Like, for instance, when we first started dating, Caleb hated chicken.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but he
And
hated chicken because of me, right? That's what you're saying. You're like, yeah, I know. He didn't like my white mom chicken. He was like, you make white mom chicken, it's gross.
right, but you're like, I don't care. This is what's for dinner. Sometimes we forget that response is just as applicable to the stepkids as it is to the real kids. And
Yes.
so who cares if my kids don't like what you're cooking? This is what's for dinner. This is what we're eating.
Right. And I agree with you, but there's all of that. This is where it goes back to why a blended family is difficult because you have all those undercurrents of like, well, I don't really, like I feel this. Well, I don't feel like that. Well, then I don't, you know what I mean? Whereas if it's your kids, you're like, I don't care, eat or don't. I mean, this is what we're having. So have a piece of bread. If it's your stepkids, then like I said, all this stuff comes into it. Like, I want to make them happy and I have to try to please them. And then I've got this whole jealousy thing. And I'm just going to flat out say it. I feel that in blended families, and maybe more so in some than others, the females, the mothers have issues. I'm not saying that we couldn't get along. I'm just saying just by the function of being a female, biologically, you are, like we talked about, you are programmed to not provide for, but protect, nurture your children, your nest. Now, this woman's children are disrupting my nest, and I've got it going all the way that I want it to be, and this is how I feel safe.
Right.
But by nature, when you're in a blended family, the children of another mother come into your nest, and then you wonder why you get all upset or all off kilter, right? I'm not saying that it's okay to act on that behavior. I'm just saying that it's normal to feel those underlying currents.
Absolutely.
I think.
Absolutely normal. For the man's side, taking a look at it from two things. One, from a father that's already got kids, and that, for men, just don't look at it the same way that, well, I should say dads don't look at it the same way that moms do.
You say most dads, right? We have to be politically
Right. But
correct. Come on.
okay, yeah, most dads. So what we wind up doing is we're looking at you and going like, well, what's the big deal? Okay, it's my kids and your kids, and and it's not that big of a deal. Well, we
So they
don't.
don't like dinner.
Right. Yeah, so they don't like dinner. So what? And they're like, no, 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 you don't understand. This is my household. This is my nest. And we don't get that. We don't look at it that way because our role as the dads is to empty the nest. So
You're
we're
right.
like, get out, fly,
Right.
little birdie, go. And so we start they're trying to nurture the kids to, okay, you need to start learning how to take care of yourself. You need to figure this out before you graduate, because when you graduate, typically, you're on your own.
Yeah.
So I really think that dads have a pretty easy task. It's not that much different between stepkids and their kids. I mean, in my
Okay.
opinion.
So you're saying, well, um, in a situation like that, in a community like that, say a tribal situation, the male has these separate households, and this still exists in some communities. So the male has these separate households of families, and the man goes to the different households. He is expected to provide for every one of the households, all of the children, equally based on their status in the family. And so you're saying the guy goes around and he's like, biologically, what you're saying, if I understand right, is biologically it's easier for men to adapt to that situation than it is
Yes.
for the female to adapt to, now I'm raising somebody else's children part-time, yet she's right over there. Like, she's
Yes.
going to have a time off while I have her kids come into my nest, not follow my rules, not do things the way I want them done. I have to enforce that and then feel like I'm being a bad person while she's over there having a vacation, which is not the case. I mean, my kids have a stepmother too. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that that's the feelings that we have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And now I will say that for a single man marrying into a blended family, it's quite a bit different, because he's going from a single guy who only has to worry about himself. He's like, hey, da 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 da, hey, party it up. I'm gonna sleep in when I'm gonna do this, whatever, blah 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 blah. And he's like, oh, this is mom's boyfriend. This is my girlfriend's kids. And then that ring goes on, and oh, bam! All of a sudden, he's a dad, and he's expected to fill a dad role, and he's still in the mindset of, wait a minute, I'm not a dad. I'm still a single guy. Oh wait, no, I'm not a single guy, but I just got married. But I don't have, I do have kids. I'm like, so
Do
I
I
mean,
or don't I? Because she's really protective and she won't let me parent about these things. Or there's ones where it's like, I want to parent, like I'm fully invested in this, but she won't let me parent. So getting back on track here. So why still parents feel like outsiders, and why does this happen? So like we said, there's loyalty binds, so kids feel guilty. There were times when Kaya felt like that, right? I mean, she felt like, okay, well, if I build a relationship with Travis, then how is my dad going to feel about that? How am I going to do that? And I know because of complications between Winnie and her mom, that doesn't happen as much, but there's definitely that situation there with Zach and his mom, right? And it's the same, they have the same mom. I remember going through times where it was like, well, my mom does it this way, and my mom does this, and my mom does that, and I couldn't do whatever it was, I couldn't do it like she could. I think that's because we have to, as the adults in the relationship, have to understand that the children, to them it feels like, if I love you, I don't have enough love for my mom or my dad. So then I understand that I can share the love, kind of thing.
there's no limit to how much you can love somebody, and you
Hmm.
can love multiple people. There's not a cap on how much you can love or anything like that.
But
And
it's the parent's role, it's the adult's role to help the children learn that behavior, not expect them to adapt to it, to help them walk through that as the coaches of the team. Their role is to look at that and say, okay, it looks like maybe you're having a hard time because we're getting along. Well, what does that mean for your relationship with your mom? Sometimes, though, the kids will like you, but then they just are not very good at change. Like, some kids are better at adapting to change than other kids. I remember with Kaya, like, she's like, like you just met him like yesterday. I you're getting married, you just met. And I'm like, it's been like a year, Kaya.
right.
And she's like, no, it hasn't. It's only been 2 weeks. It's only been like, yeah, I deal with this. And that, is another time, like I just said, we have to stop, which is really hard because I had all these feelings for you. I'm excited about being in a new relationship. I'm excited about moving on. And here my kids are like, oh, hell no. I
Right.
ain't going down that path.
My kids had similar thoughts too. So we had to slow down a minute, what's going on? Or is this the right time to be doing this? And we talked it over, and then we went and talked to the kids. Okay, this is what the situation is. I am not trying to take over your dad's position, and you're not trying to take over their mom's position, and lay it out and ease those fears. This is not us trying to take over. It is about enhancing each other and providing more for the kids.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, together, like being on the same page, right? I think one of the other things really that has was really difficult thinking on this topic is the differences in parenting styles, and I think we'll get into that quite a bit more in other episodes. But there's huge amount of change in the household dynamics. It's a whole different culture from one family to another. And so it really takes an open mind to be able to step back and accept and examine different perspectives.
so the two families having two different parenting styles, like my family, the way that I parented with Zach and Winnie, and your family, the way that you parented with Kaya and Caleb. And then we come together, and it's two different countries. It's like Mexico and Canada. And
Mhm.
then we come together and we create a whole new one.
Yes.
That's America.
Yes.
And it's different than both. And so the parents need to adapt to that also. I had to learn how to set boundaries with my kids. I kind of went into that on the first episode about being a Disney dad, but I was not good at having boundaries with the kids, and you were very good at having boundaries, and so you had to learn how to relax a little bit, and
Yeah.
I had to learn how to strengthen a lot.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that just we created a whole new thing.
That's a really good point. It's a really good point. That's why it's blended by design, right? Because
Right.
we're looking at this and we're saying, okay, it's not just blending where you throw two different things in the blender and mix it up and it's, a mishmash. It's actually taking a look at what is here and what is here and how can we fit these things together. So it really is about blending together by
Right.
design, by looking at, by taking a step
Yep.
back and saying, okay, where are we coming from and where are we going? What are we creating that's new?
Right.
And so this isn't something that you can just go into and demand. You have to create space for this to grow. Blended families don't happen overnight. It takes time, but
Yep.
sometimes it feels like you're just going through the motions, like you're
Yeah.
just putting in the effort, putting in the effort, putting in the effort. We're 4 years down the road now, and I still struggle sometimes with the way that the kids behave and how they interact with the way that they expect things should be
Yep.
at the house.
I have my own struggles with the way that Caleb, I mean, he's out of the house now, but Kaya, she's getting ready to graduate. And I've got my own struggles with how things are progressing with her. And we talk about that and talk about both. And we both get frustrated with each other. And, but we don't fight about it.
No, we
We
share.
share our feelings and
Right.
share our
Yeah.
frustrations with each other, and we don't take it as attacks most of the time. There's sometimes that I feel attacked, but I let you know if I feel attacked, and you do the same
True.
thing. So yeah, feeling like an outsider, you feel helpless,
Yeah, you do.
and it's like it's so much easier to see things from an outside perspective. I can see this happening,
Hmm.
and then this is what I'm trying to help, but I can't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what you're bringing forward is a really important strength of blended families, and that is that there is an outside perspective.
Yeah.
So, blended families have the opportunity to be very healthy because they bring to the relationship an outside perspective. So,
Mhm.
if you can work consistently and slowly over time and be transparent and build trust as a couple, as a
Yes.
coaching team for the family, then you can build off of those strengths. For instance, we could leave it with this maybe. The conversation that we had right before we got on was we've limited Kaya's Kaya is spending money because she's going to be 18 and she needs to get a job. Okay. So now she needs to start buying her own things. And it's been that way for a while. We can get into the details of that in another podcast. But the essential thing was I'm left feeling like, oh, well, so Winnie gets to have whatever amount of money in allowance, but Kaya's not allowed to have anything. And so I bring this to you. We're having this conversation because what had happened was Kaya said, hey, I need some clothes. And I'm like, okay, well, her dad bought her some clothes and we need to buy her some clothes for here. And so the way I brought that to you was Kaya's bought some clothes. Her dad's bought her some clothes. And so she needs some clothes for here. And she has presented that she doesn't feel like she should need to bring the clothes back and forth. And I said, and I agree with her. So I think we should spend some money on clothes. And right. But the whole point in me bringing that to you was, and I think this is the important part, is to understand that we have our emotions to deal with. So I'm bringing that to you from that perspective of a biological mother saying, okay, this is my child and my nest. Okay. My child needs clothing and I don't really care what you say about anything else. I will get her clothing. Right. And it's not even that you're against doing that. It's just the perspective of looking at it and being like, oh, don't you even say anything. While at the same time, we also provide for Winnie. We provide equally for the children. But it's that consistency in those conversations, and then you coming into the conversation and saying, okay, well, that's not what I'm trying to make you feel like at all. My perspective is
Right. My
is
perspective is that I'm trying to figure out how to get Kaya to understand how to take care of herself and take responsibility for herself. And so to limit the amount of money that we give her and make her as uncomfortable as possible without being detrimental, to get her to go out and get a job. Because right now, she's very comfortable where she's at and she doesn't want to get a job because, like you said, she's very uncomfortable with change, and getting a job is change.
right, and she
And
can't get a job right now that affords to buy her Olaplex shampoo and Lulu leggings.
right, exactly. And that was actually the thing that I was wondering is like, okay, so when you say that, well, what is it that she wanting? And first thing that went into my head was, well, Kaya's kind of expensive. She likes her clothes and
Bougie.
she
She's
likes the
bougie.
Lululemons. And you're like, okay, well, she needs about 4 or 5 pairs of leggings. And I'm like, okay, number signs going up there. And I'm like, so how much are we looking at? And you get me
Mm-hmm.
a number that's way lower. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, we can do that.
Right. Right. So yeah, again, it's just I think bringing it back around to it's the conversations and just knowing that some days feel like you're making progress and then some days feel like I need a freaking vacation. It doesn't that doesn't mean that your blended family is failing. It means that you're blending. It means you're
Yeah,
doing life together. It means you're
absolutely.
doing it. You're doing the thing, right? You're fighting the good fight.
Yeah, because original families have those same feelings, just not as pronounced, I think.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
how many
It-
times when you were married with the kids as dad, how many times were you like, I need a break?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I think, and then when you're looking at it though in the step parent
Mm-hmm.
role in a blended family, you're like, oh, this freaking definitely because of this
Yeah.
whole because of him and his kids, I gotta bail. You know what I mean? Like I am getting the he double hockey sticks out. But that's where those conversations come in to really talk about, okay, what's going on? How are you feeling? What's really happening? Where might this be coming from? How can we address it? And really, all those moments are what make up blending.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, if you don't feel
So,
like an outsider right now, you will.
yep,
Worry.
you sure will. You will. And if you're struggling with feeling like an outsider all the time, well, yeah, we kind of been there.
We've been
There's
there,
hope.
and there's
There's hope.
things. There's hope. There's things you can do, right? Like we went through
Yes.
the things you can do. I think
Yep.
really it's just hang in there.
Yep.
Um,
A lot of grace.
taking it one day at a time. A lot of guys taking it one day at a time, right?
Yeah.
So over time, walls do come down and trust builds, and you do get to that place of real connection.
Yep.
It's always interrupted with life because that's life. But that's
Mhm.
it does it shifts over time and you do become more glued. You definitely build you build that team, that you build your own culture,
Right.
you build your own country, like you said.
What's been the hardest part of feeling like an outsider for your family? Let us know. We'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, so here we have the Blended Family Resource Guide, which is a guide that has 7 steps in it on strategies for building connection. They're things that we've actually done in our own family to work together on trying to build connection. So that's available on our website at blendedpathways.com. Also, we have a small but growing Facebook community group for Blended by Design podcast and for our community for Blended Pathways. So you can hop on over to our website, and that link is there. We'll also go ahead and put it onto the show notes, so you have that as well. And we'll talk to you next time, I think. So peace
Yeah.
out.
Peace out. Bye.
Hey,
All
bye
right.
bye.
Bye. Okay.